hot on the trail of ancestors, and she's learned a lot along the way. And lucky for her, she's been able to use her vast knowledge of the title industry, deed records, probate records, and she's been able to marry that with volunteering over at the archives. And I'll just introduce her right now. Come on down. We heard some of her background last month, but we're so excited to have a two-part session. And I wanted to introduce Bob Venable over there. He is on a project to videotape a lot of our presentations and other groups' presentations, so we're real happy to have him. And he's taped the last one, and he's going to tape this one tonight too. So just let Celia come on in, and we'll get behind you.
I was so impressed with Debbie's PowerPoint that she made for me last time that my sister helped me make a PowerPoint tonight. So if you'll bear with me, I've never done this before, so it may take a little time. This is No Missing Links Part 2. For those of you who were here last night,
I talked about family information and what could be found in the deed records. So just a quick review of the documents that couldn't be found. We have the deed of conveyance, different ways to get the property into your name. We have affidavits of heirship. We have quitclaim title deeds. We have warranty deeds and trust deeds. So that's a review of the different documents that you might be able to find ancestors down at the county clerk's office in the deed records. We saw this last time. This was the deed to my great-great-grandparents that I found of property that they had in Clinton County, Iowa. And I was looking for a sale of that property and got this deed eventually after the last child aged out of the Masonic home. And the 4 children sold the property, and it earned income for the children's guardianship estate during their lifetime at the Masonic home. But here was the surprise deed that I didn't have with me last time but told you about. This is my great-great-grandmother that also lived in Iowa. Her husband was George D. Johnson, and we never could find a marriage between them. We had no proof that they lived together in Iowa, but here was a surprise deed that I got, and it said Sarah Wolf, former wife of G.D. Johnson, which is George D. Johnson. This is the first recorded proof that we had that these two people were married. And so this was a surprise find out of the deed records. However, George soon left to seek his fortune in the West. And as many will tell you, to get away from Sarah. George ended up in Tombstone, Arizona, where, as you can see, he did not find things all rosy in the West and soon came to the end of his rope. Alas, in haste, if not in error. Poor old George was hung in error. He obviously was a scoundrel, but the town people took it upon themselves to help the sheriff, and they caught him and hung him, and he wasn't even guilty. And this is the story written by one of the historians out in Tombstone, Arizona, Ben Trawick, of that incident and the stagecoach robbery and everything, and that's how we found out that poor old George was hung in error, which that makes a good story for a family, you know. Like so many people I've recently met and talked to, we did not know that Tarrant County had an archives department overseen by Dr. Dawn Youngblood. I had received an email from Shirley Apley before she retired that the Tarrant County Archives was needing volunteers to help them coordinate, to sort, to build data systems of the vast amount of data that they had in the archives. And that sounded like something that I might be interested in because I loved history. On my first day, Dawn told me of several projects that I might be interested in working on, and the one that I chose and leapt upon was the Stewart probates that had been donated by the Stewart Title Company through their years of examination of titles to determine who had ownership. And oftentimes when the people are dead, well, they had to go through all the probate records to see who the heirs are. Well, if any of you have ever read wills, you know that they can be most interesting, and I didn't get it done as soon as I wanted to because I just kept reading these wills. The wills disclose family feuds, family favorites, family secrets, and just all sorts of interesting and surprising, not to mention shocking things. However, what we have at the archives are only partial recorded copies of documents, because Stewart only needed those documents from the probate court that had to do with ownership and who the heirs were. So if you find something that belongs to your family and you need other documents, we have the probate number in the database, and you can just go over to the probate court and look at that particular case and get other copies of documents that you might need. As I began to go through the 25 boxes of files, I began to see how important the information in them could be to genealogists. Not only did the probates tell the date of death, many times it gave the time of death, it gave the place the person was when they died, were they on vacation. It just told all sorts of things that you would never find anywhere else but in those probate records. And let me tell you, those people that had moved off to Hollywood, California, oh, those were wonderful records to read. They were really eccentric people. The probate records are just not about death, though. The probates could be a guardianship of minor children, or they could be a case of a lunatic. Now, we're much kinder now, and we call them persons of unsound mind, but I began to notice a plan. When a husband got tired of his wife, he would just have her declared a lunatic, which was done by a 6-man jury, no women. They could have input by family members, acquaintances, and the doctor. Those probate documents also tell where they will be sent for incarceration, if that's what you want to call it, but they're going to be sent to an institution. It was probably to the wife's benefit because the husband was getting rid of her, but she was also getting rid of him and the kids and housework. But we find a lot of those records over there too, and those are found in the probate records. The most important thing I began to see were affidavits of fact, affidavits of heirship, affidavits of family history. These documents would just not be found anywhere else unless they were needed in the deed records, but most of them are going to be in the probate records. And the only reason Stewart needed these documents was to show who the heirs were of a deceased person so they could know who was entitled to the property that they were examining. These legal affidavits give information regarding births, deaths, marriages, ages of children, property they may have owned or bought, just all kind of little jewels of information that you are not going to find anywhere else but in the probate records. One of the most interesting documents I came across was a probate of a lady that had died here in Fort Worth. She had one son living here in Fort Worth, and the other son was in World War II in the Pacific, and he was missing in action. Wanting to settle the estate, the living son wrote to the Navy Department stating his need to have them change the status to dead so that their mother's estate could be settled. The Navy responded with a vivid detail of the battleship attack by Japan, what went on, their survivors that had been picked up, and since it had been nearly a year since that ship was sunk, they granted the mother's request and declared his MIA brother dead so that the estate could be settled. You wouldn't expect to find the story of a battle in the Pacific in the probate records, but there it was. The oldest probate was 1854 from a farmer in Grapevine. His will states that he is leaving his wife less property than he is leaving his children because he is leaving his wife the house, and the 4 slaves. Boy, that just really got to me. I know that history and tells me about slavery in the South, but that really hit me right in the face. That was in the probate records. I met a young lady that was doing her doctoral thesis on the Negro community in Tarrant County, and when I told her what I had found, she was most anxious to read that, and I believe came several days later down to the archives to peruse that document. Some of the probates that are contained in the archives of early founders of Fort Worth, oil men, prominent members of our large ethnic communities, and just plain folks. There's even a copy of a will by Adolph Bush of the Anheuser-Busch Company. Now, why would we need a will in Tarrant County Archives for that? Because he owned property here in Tarrant County, and Stewart needed the copy of the will to decide who owned the property because it was involved in a corporation, but they still needed that will. His will gives a vivid description of his villa in the Black Forest that he dearly loved. Many of the wills have long lists of devisees. There's that EE that we talked about last time. The EE gets it and the OR does it, remember? Well, these lists of devisees in the will may be a whole list of the family. Some are wonderful genealogy records in themselves as they list bequests to their sisters, their brothers, their nieces, their nephews, all sorts of people. A lot of them even list bequests to maybe their cook or their maid or something. So those families also can search the genealogy, the probate records to find out those types of things. So within a will, you may have the whole family, including those that may have been the black sheep that you never knew anything about. Many of them tell particularly why somebody was left out of a will. Many of them tell the story in great detail, and therein lies the rest of the story that you kind of heard about but you never knew about. Many of the probate records are disputed wills. There's several over there, and those could involve and need the wisdom of Solomon to settle. Several of the probates that we have over there went all the way to the state Supreme Court, and one, I believe, went all the way to the federal Supreme Court to solve it. Of course, you have to understand when money's involved, anything can happen, and often does. However, my favorite will that I read at Radicant Title Company when I was in the examination department, the man that had passed away did not want a funeral, and he asked his executor to invite all of his friends and his family to a party, and that he spend up to $1,000, and he preferred that it be a beer and barbecue party. Now there's a Texan, and I wished I'd known him and been his friend. As for my own experience, I told you that my grandmother had been an orphan and lived at the Masonic home. I had no trouble tracing her father's family, but her mother's family was a mystery. All I knew by inventory of their estate of the probate records of Hardeman County was this listing that showed one pair of white wool blankets at Mrs. White's in Altus, Oklahoma. Now we knew that my grandmother's grandmother had remarried, and we knew that the name was White. If it'd been Smith, it'd been the same thing. There are a ton of Whites. So we hadn't found her yet. And I want you to know that in an inventory, there are all sorts of things that you can find out about how that person lived and how wealthy they were. This is just a part of the last part of the inventory of my great-great-grandmother. Notice she had a telephone box, and she died in 1906. She had a call bell. She had an organ, and we're pretty sure that she must have taught the oldest daughter how to play it because she was the organist at the Masonic home all the time that she lived there. So this was a wealthy family. Their whole estate was a little over $13,000. But when you read these inventories of the estates, it gives you a picture and a snapshot into the lives of those people. What did they have? What were they raising? We could find out by this that they were fixing to start raising pigs because they had so many bales of pig wire that eventually got returned, but they were going to start raising pigs up in Medicine Mound. But it was not until I obtained the probate of the Orphan Children's Guardianship that I found the information I wanted to know, because here is an affidavit of heirship, or an affidavit of fact, by that second husband of my great-great-grandmother. It says I.H.W. White. What he's stating is that the oldest grandson has reached the age of adulthood and is now entitled to his share of his parents' estate. There was the information I'd been looking for. There it was, right there in the probate records in the children's guardianship. Well, I first of all looked him up on findagrave.com, and lo and behold, not only did I find him, but it tells me that he's survived by his wife, Nancy Elizabeth Southall Henry White. That was the great-great-grandmother I had been looking for. And I would never have found her had it not been for the probate records that gave me the grandfather's name. I'd been looking for her maiden name. We really didn't know whether her name was Sarah or Nancy or what her first name was. So from the probate records, and then finding the husband that had all of the information about about Nancy, it also mentioned 6 children we never knew were in the family. They had 6 other children that nobody ever knew anything about it. Now we know why Grandma White didn't want the 4 orphan children, because she already had 6 at home, so she didn't need 4 more. But from then, you can easily see that from the probate records, it led me to my grandmother's maternal family, back 3 more generations. It gave me marriage records that I could find. So sometimes the probate records may hold the key to the brick wall you have hit in your search. We know that part of our family is Native American. We know that the name was Henry. Her first husband was Henry. We know that there is a large group of Cherokee Indians that lived in Hardeman County, Tennessee. And yes, that Hardeman man came to Texas, and that's what Hardeman County is named after. So Hardeman County, Tennessee and Hardeman County, Texas are totally related. I've been out to the archives, and there's just a slew of Henrys that are Cherokees that came from that. I just have to find the right one and get all of my little links back together and get them in a row. That's where my grandmother finally ended up, in Oklahoma, from the Trail of Tears, from Tennessee, those Indians that made that trek. She ended up in Greer County, which is now part Jackson County and part Greer County, before she married and moved to Chillicothe, Texas. Well, really, she lived in Medicine Mound, and they owned 435 acres, which the children eventually lost. Why? Because nobody thought to set up a guardianship as soon as their parents died and manage their money, and 4 little orphans could not manage their money. Now, my great-grandmother's brother tried to manage it for a while, but he was not a very good business person. And from the looks of things, he was not a very good husband either. They had 12 children. And on the Greer County Historical Society website, they have a listing of the probate records that they have. And I found that aunt and uncle, and I thought, oh goodness, so I sent off for the records. And lo and behold, when I got it, I was hoping for a will that would tell me what happened to poor old Henry, but instead I got a divorce. And look what it found. In that divorce decree, it gave me the names of the 2 oldest daughters and the men that they had married, plus all the ages and the names of the other children. Now, I never expected to find a divorce in the probate records, but this may be another place that you might want to look, is maybe divorce records might have that information you need. This was just astounding to me, and so I was really excited when I got it. Once I found my great-great-grandmother's second husband, I then found her place of burial. There must have been an upset in that family because she's not buried the same place that he's buried, but we'll never know what happened. If you will notice, though, the one thing that it tells me, not only did it tells me that she was the wife of B.J. Henry, that's the one I'm looking for, and I think he's the Indian connection, and Mr. White, and the 6 children, but the last line said she is the daughter of John Greer and Mary Elizabeth Terry Southall. I now had a maiden name for my great-great-great-grandmother to start looking for. And if you'll notice down there at the bottom, whoever puts these up on findagrave.com, if you click on that name down there, Dionne Thompson, it'll give a email address for her. So I emailed her, told her who I was, sent her the information that I had. She sent me back the information on the 6 kids that we never knew anything about. And now I've completed some more of the family. So in ending, I urge you to visit the Tarrant County Archives and view the displays set up and see what records are housed there in addition to the Stewart probates. You will find family histories that have been donated, and they're marvelous. You're going to find early maps, abstracts, historical artifacts, early criminal court cases, and school census records, just to name a few. A real plethora of information is waiting to be perused. That brick wall you may have just hit might be resolved in the probate records or a visit to the Tarrant County Archives. One last note that I want to tell you about the archives was something really exciting the last time I was there. Dawn showed me a book, and it's a declaration of intention. It's dated 1879 to 1895. These are original signed declarations of intention by immigrants to renounce their country and become a permanent citizen of the United States. In pristine condition, about 300 pages, 3 declarations to a page. Dr. Youngblood has told me that a project is going to be done to get these indexed and out on the internet so that you can peruse them. But these are going to be a marvelous find for you genealogists, especially if anybody in your family were immigrants into this area during that time. These are not recorded documents, and they're not going to be found any other place, and I was just totally blown away when I saw them. What a marvelous find to all of you families that have immigrants in your family history. It is just mind-boggling to see these things. They're signed, front and back, tell what country. King of Italy, they're renouncing the King of Italy, English, British. It is just marvelous. So I urge any of you, if you have immigrants in your family, to go and check those out. They may be there. That's all I have for the probate records. Has anybody got any questions that they would like to ask? Okay. I want you all to go digging in those probate records because you're going to find the things you need. Thank you.